What if true happiness isn't found in success, power, or wealth, but in something far deeper? Today, we step into one of the most profound and revolutionary messages ever spoken: Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. This was not just a sermon. It was a blueprint for a kingdom-centered life, a call to a way of living that defies human expectations and turns worldly values upside down. Spoken over 2,000 years ago, his words were radical then and remain just as radical today. Are you ready to discover what it truly means to be blessed? For generations, the Jewish people had longed for a Messiah, a king who would overthrow their oppressors and restore their earthly kingdom. But for 400 years, God had been silent. No prophet, no divine messenger. Then suddenly Jesus of Nazareth emerged. News of his miracles, authority, and teachings spread throughout the land. Wherever he went, crowds followed, some seeking healing, others hoping for a political revolution. But what they heard from him was something far greater than rebellion or conquest. The hillside that day was filled with people from every walk of life: fishermen, farmers, the poor, the weary, even Roman soldiers. Yet, Jesus didn't speak of war or power. He spoke of something far more powerful: an invisible kingdom. Not one built on riches or force, but on humility, mercy, and love. He declared that the poor would inherit the kingdom, the meek would rule the earth, and the persecuted would be called blessed. This was more than a sermon. It was an invitation to transformation. Jesus wasn't calling for an external revolution. He was calling for an internal one. A revolution of the heart, of the soul, of the way we see God, ourselves, and the world around us. The Sermon on the Mount is not just history. It is a call that still echoes today. In a world obsessed with power, wealth, and recognition, Jesus offers a different path, one of surrender, trust, and divine purpose. What does it truly mean to live as citizens of this kingdom? Let's step back onto that hillside, uncover the depth of his words, and see how the Beatitudes can reshape our lives. Before we begin, take a moment to subscribe, and share this message, because the world needs to hear the truth of Jesus' kingdom. Matthew 5 verses 3 to 10. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. In Aramaic, the phrase Jesus used reflects spiritual humility, not material poverty. To be poor in spirit is to recognize our deep dependence on God, to empty ourselves of pride and self-reliance. It is the awareness that without God, we are nothing. With him, we have everything. In a culture that glorifies self-sufficiency, this beatitude challenges us to let go of ego and embrace true humility. It reminds us that the kingdom of heaven is not earned through status or achievement, but received through surrender. Are you willing to set aside pride and open your heart to the wealth of heaven? Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Mourning here is not just sorrow over personal loss, but a deep grief over sin, injustice, and the brokenness of the world. It is the heart that aches for what should be, the longing for God's righteousness to heal and restore. We live in a world that often hides pain behind distractions, busyness, entertainment, or even numbness. Yet, Jesus tells us that when we truly face our sorrow, God himself will be our comfort. His presence, his peace, and his promise of redemption are for those who bring their burdens to him. Will you allow yourself to mourn, not in despair but in hope, so that you can experience the comfort only God can give? Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. In Aramaic, Ton Lamek speaks of a gentleness that comes from strength under control. Meekness is not passivity or weakness. It is having the power to assert but choosing instead to trust in God's timing and plan. The meek are those who yield their own will to God's, knowing that true authority comes from him. In a world that glorifies aggression and self-promotion, this beatitude turns our understanding of power upside down. The meek do not fight for their inheritance. They receive it as a gift from the one who owns all things. Imagine a life where you no longer have to strive or compete for recognition, where your quiet confidence in God's provision allows you to rest in his promises. Are you willing to trust in his strength over your own? Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. In Aramaic, Ton El within Luda conveys an intense craving. Not a passing desire, but a desperation, like that of a starving man longing for food or a parched traveler seeking water. This hunger is not just for personal morality, but for the world to reflect God's justice, mercy, and truth. Today, we see injustice all around us: corruption in leadership, oppression of the weak, moral decay in society. This beatitude challenges us to refuse complacency and actively pursue God's righteousness in our lives and communities. And Jesus promises that this hunger will not go unsatisfied. He will fill us with His presence, His power, and His purpose. What are you hungering for today? Is it something temporary? Or is it the eternal satisfaction found in God's righteousness? Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. In Aramaic, Tun Layman describes a deep, heartfelt compassion that mirrors the mercy of God. Mercy is more than forgiveness. It is empathy in action, a willingness to enter into someone else's pain and offer relief. It is an invitation to lay aside judgment and extend grace to those who least deserve it. In our culture, where grudges are nurtured and vengeance is glorified, showing mercy is an act of rebellion against the world's norms. But Jesus reminds us that the mercy we give is the mercy we receive. When we forgive, we free not only the other person but ourselves. Who in your life needs your mercy today? What would it look like to reflect God's heart in your relationships? Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. In Aramaic, Ton Labarda Liba speaks of a heart that is undivided, free from hypocrisy, and focused entirely on God. Purity here is not just about avoiding sin, but about having a single-minded devotion to the Creator. We live in an age of distraction, where our hearts are pulled in 1,000 directions. Career ambitions, social pressures, endless streams of information. Yet Jesus calls us to clear the clutter and fix our eyes on Him. Only then can we truly see God in our lives, in others, and in the world around us. What is clouding your vision today? How can you begin to purify your heart and draw closer to Him? Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. In Aramaic, Tun Lama describes those who actively build peace, not just by avoiding conflict, but by reconciling broken relationships and fostering harmony. Peacemakers reflect the very heart of God, who sent His Son to reconcile humanity to Himself. In a divided world, peacemaking requires courage. It means standing in the gap, risking misunderstanding, and choosing love over hate. But the reward is great. To be called a child of God is to share in His mission and His identity. Where in your life can you bring peace? How can you become an agent of reconciliation today? Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Jesus ends with a challenge. Those who live for righteousness may suffer for it. Standing for truth, mercy, and justice isn't always popular, but the reward is eternal. Are you willing to be misunderstood, even mistreated, for the sake of God's kingdom? The Beatitudes are not just a set of ideals. They are an invitation to a transformed life. Will you allow them to shape your heart and your actions today? If this message spoke to you, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe, and let's bring the light of Jesus' teachings to a world that desperately needs it. God bless you.